on 1019 WDET FM. I'm Tia Graham, and this week on the microphone, we are joined by our show producer, Sam Corey.
Hey, Tia, how you doing?
It's going. It's Thursday. It's going.
It's Thursday.
Tigers won, so that's a good thing.
That is a good thing.
It's a great thing. Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about what we got on the show today.
Well, it's a pretty packed-filled show of conversation.
Yeah.
Today, we're going to have a conversation with a local artist about her dystopian novel set in Detroit as well. We'll learn a little bit more about Tejano music here, and then we'll also have a conversation about the Tigers. Super excited about that, Sam.
Me too. There's so many great conversations, and we want to hop into one of them right now. The holiest day of the year for the Jewish people starts tomorrow night. Yom Kippur goes from sunset to sunset and is marked by fasting, prayer, and most importantly, atonement. For Jews observing the holiday, that means apologizing directly to those they've wronged over the year. As a Jewish person myself, the practice of apology is something I take really seriously. It's something that I want to get better at. But what about when you feel you deserve an apology and don't get it? What then? Susan Shapiro is a professor and writer, and one of her most recent books covers this topic. In the book, it's titled The Forgiveness Tour: How to Find the Perfect Apology. She's here now to discuss apology, forgiveness, and why those two things are really important to us as humans. Susan, welcome to the Metro.
Thank you.
It's great to have you here. The Forgiveness Tour is about not getting the apology that someone feels they deserve. I'm curious why we have this internal desire to want apology. Is it about, wanting some higher truth, seeking sort of like honesty? Is it about not wanting to be taken advantage of by others? Why do you think we have this strong desire for apology from those we feel who have wronged us?
Yeah, I think that we have a naive sense that the world is just and fair. And I think when horrible things happen, we're shocked by it. And so, for example, in Forgiveness Tour, I interview a Holocaust survivor and a Bosnian Muslim victim of ethnic cleansing and a woman whose father raped her. And I think when those things happen, we're just so shocked and it rocks our whole worldview and we don't know how to recover. And I think on some level, having the world deem this to be a horrible thing that happened or a crime and people should be put in jail and there should be a punishment. I think that kind of attempts to fix our worldview and attempts to repair things that seem horrible and unfair.
Do you have any idea of why we like think that the world should be fair and just, like why we have that internal sense? Because I agree with you. I mean, kids from very early on are like, that's not fair, that's not right. I guess I'm curious why you think we have that sort of internal sense.
Well, I mean, if you look at all religions, that's kind of what they teach us, that basically, people are good, God is just. I think it'd be really hard to live otherwise. I mean, I remember at one point after I had lost a few people that I really cared about in my life, I started talking to my therapist about death and how we're all going to die or whatever. And he just stopped me and he's like, okay, you can't exist healthy on this, change what you're thinking about. You can't, there's certain things you can't focus on if you're going to live and if you're going to have a good life and if you're going to be healthy. And I think, unfortunately, the more that you focus on the unfairness of the world, the harder it is to continue. I personally can't even look at the news until like at 1 a.m. I could look at the newspaper and read newspapers at this point. And I give myself 5 minutes because, quickest way to be manically depressed and not be able to function is to follow the news, which is just filled with horror these days.
Yeah. So you went on this tour, as you were referring to. You spoke with rabbis and other religious figures and scholars to learn about what to do when someone feels they're owed an apology but don't get it. I'm wondering from doing that tour, what you learned is a good apology. What is doing apology well?
Well, what I learned is that there actually is a perfect, effective apology. And I quote a couple books that discuss it. One of them by a Harvard scholar who actually based his on Maimonides. But so a good apology is basically someone says, they fall on their sword and say, I'm sorry, I really screwed up, and repeat what they did wrong. They explain why it happened. They discuss why it will never happen again and how it will never happen again. And they offer a reparation to fix what was broken.
We want apology. We feel like it's necessary oftentimes. but we're not really good at this. We're at least not very good at this in America. I do wonder why you think we're kind of bad at doing apology and doing it with sincerity and following all of the things, of acknowledging, taking responsibility, explaining why something happened, noting that it won't happen again, or at least trying to make sure it won't happen again, and then offering some sort of reparation or healing.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're flawed human beings, and I think a lot of people are myopic. And I think, just for an example, I'm from Michigan, and everyone always made fun of me for doing therapy, as if that's a ridiculous thing to want to understand my own motives and be a better person and work through stuff. So I think, unfortunately, most people are not really operating at a high level of self-awareness. And I think that, just trying to living in itself could be a struggle for a lot of people for a lot of reasons. And I think it's somehow, there's a selfishness or myopia that takes over. And I think that, it's inevitable, since we're human and flawed, that we're going to make mistakes, which is part of what Yom Kippur really is about, atoning for our past mistakes and acknowledging we're human, and not only forgiving other people, but forgiving ourselves.
Yeah. If you're just joining us, we're speaking with professor and writer Susan Shapiro. She's the author of many books, including one on forgiveness and apology. We're talking about these things the day before Yom Kippur, which is known as the Day of Atonement. Susan, in your book, in this book we're talking about, you felt betrayed by your mentor, who was your therapist, which is just a very intimate relationship. And you didn't get the apology that you felt you deserved originally. You eventually did. And after you did get the apology, you went and apologized to others that you felt that maybe you had wronged, which I think takes a lot of strength and a lot of courage. I guess I'm curious why your mentor's apology spurred you to want to apologize to others.
Yeah, well, I had been extremely connected to him for 15 years. He was my addiction specialist, and he helped me get married and really helped me with career and work. So I was fairly devastated by what I saw as a betrayal. And also when I asked him, I told him I thought he owed me an apology, and he said, "I'm sorry for the imaginary crime you think I committed," which made me want to commit a real crime.
Yeah.
And I was very, very, very freaked out and upset because he was my guru. So it was like I needed a shrink to help me figure out my shrink. And just really threw me off. And so eventually, when it got sorted out and when he came back to me and kind of explained his whole life had kind of fallen apart and, gave me the full-fledged apology, which I learned from interviewing people nobody ever really gets, it was so liberating. I really felt like there was like 100-ton weight on my head that had been lifted. And it was just this miraculous feeling. And it was so bizarre because it was just a few words, just a good apology that probably took 5 minutes that like changed the whole color of the world for me. And it fixed a year of agony. And all of a sudden I realized, oh my God, we have the power to do that, and there's so many estrangements and, between politics and wars and all this horrible stuff going on, especially interpersonally. It's so fascinated me that a few words could make such a huge difference. And then all of a sudden I decided to, I looked at my own culpability in estrangements that I had, and I realized, wait a second, there have been times when I've been insensitive and I've done things to slight people that I care about without even realizing it. And then I was giving these sucky apologies. I'm sorry if you're hurt. Boy, I didn't know we're so sensitive. I mean, those are passive. They're not even passive aggressive. They're aggressive apologies. So I felt so liberated myself. And, think of Yom Kippur and Days of Atonement. And, so I did. So I went back and I actually wrote a list of people that I think I'd heard or estrangements. And what was fascinating was now that I understood what a good apology was, I really went back and gave full-fledged apologies. And I used a lot of things that I learned in the book. For example, it's not a one-shot deal. Sometimes it's a process of asking someone for forgiveness. In Judaism, they actually say you have to ask forgiveness 3 times.
Yeah. And
then the person you hurt has to forgive you. And if they don't forgive you, you're forgiven. And the person who doesn't forgive has to ask forgiveness for not forgiving. So it's just a long process. But what was interesting was every single time I did it, went back to a situation and gave a full-fledged apology, I was absolved. They forgave me. And I just thought, oh my God. And I called it in the book a forgiveness binge. But it's just so amazing and empowering to understand that, you could take away somebody's hurt and help them heal with a few words.
Yeah, it is really powerful. It's a lot to give a full-fledged apology. There's a lot of vulnerability there, and it's giving up some amount of safety. People don't want to continuously be hurt, and if you're being vulnerable, you're opening yourself up to be hurt. And at time when maybe I don't know when maybe you don't feel like you have it in you. I guess I'm wondering what gave you that sense of grounding. What gave you the foundation to be able to apologize with full vulnerability, because that's just really, I think, hard to do. You're potentially sacrificing something.
Right. I mean, in the book, I do not subscribe to the forgiveness industry saying you should forgive everybody everything. And the book is very nuanced. And there's actually the Holocaust survivor says he thrived out of spite. And I actually wrote a piece for the Washington Post recently. Here are healthier times when you should not forgive and you should not apologize. So it's very nuanced. In the specific scenarios where I did apologize, it was, number one, it was people that I cared about a lot. And also there were things that happened where I really believed that I had done something wrong. And I think that, there's a difference between saying something or, not being there for a friend. I think those are scenarios that were very easy, black and white. I should be able to fix this versus, crimes that were committed and, just more serious, relationships with people who are abusive or toxic or narcissistic, so I think I was able to, I've been in therapy a long time. I'm a shrinkaholic. And I think that I was able to, make a distinction between, relationships that were basically healthy and good for a long period of time that I wanted to fix, versus maybe more questionable scenarios.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting point. And yeah, reading your book and thinking about the forgiveness sort of industry, was really interesting because we're pushed to do this when maybe it's not the right thing. One story that you wrote about that I thought was pretty powerful was from a friend of yours, Gary Weinstein. His 2 sons and wife were killed by a drunk driver, and Gary eventually decided to forgive the drunk driver. I just wonder if you could talk a little bit before we let you go here. What was that process of forgiveness like, and why was it important for him to forgive the driver?
Yeah, we just did an event together at Temple Israel, and he's really an amazing forgiveness activist at this point. I think what he says, when I quoted him, is that he realized that the drunk driver who killed his wife and 2 children, was an alcoholic who had a disease. The man was, had been sober, clean and sober a long time, was put in jail for 19 years. Reparations were paid. There was court. He had a lot of support from a very, very loving family. And he was a humanistic Jew who had been involved with Birmingham Temple. And I think he felt that based on his beliefs and that of his wife and 2 kids, that they would not want him to hold a grudge and be angry forever. They would want him to carry on their legacy of love and joy by, adding something, bringing something good to the world. And so he publicly forgave the drunk driver. And he's talked about a little bit about how that's helped him move on and it's helped him be a good voice in the world. And so, very, very brave, fascinating story. And I had seen Judy Burdick did a film called Transforming Loss, and I had seen Gary Weinstein in the film Transforming Loss, and he just blew my mind. He was just so interesting and illuminating. So I interviewed him for the book. Yeah,
it's just such a tough place to come to, but I guess if someone feels they have it in them, it seems really, really powerful. Susan Shapiro, author of The Forgiveness Tour, among many other books. Thank you so much for joining us on the Metro.
Right. By the way, you just have to add one thing, which is I'm the author of many books my family hates.
Except for this one. But yeah.
No, actually, they don't like this one. The ones that they like are the co-authored ones that are about someone else's family, not about my family.
Right. Thank you so much, Susan.
Thank you.
It's the Metro on 101.9 WDET FM. Just heard from Sam Corey. I'm Tia Graham. Coming up, it's Hispanic Heritage Month. And to celebrate, we're going to hear about the history and influence of Tejano music in Detroit. This is the Metro on 101.9 WDET FM. I'm Tia Graham here with the show's producer, Sam Corey.
Good to be here with you, Tia.
Awesome sauce. And it's super excited you hear the music playing in the background, Perdida, which is music by Martin Solis and Los Primos. We did find a little bit of that music, so we were super excited to play it on the show today. However, Detroit, we all know, is filled with histories and people who are important to the communities they represent. But some of those stories don't make it out of the communities where they originated. Tejano music, or Tex-Mex music, originated in Texas. It's a blend of different sounds and instruments from Mexico and other countries, including Poland and Czech Republic. Martin Solis made Tejano music popular in Detroit with his band Los Primos. Solis was a self-taught guitarist, having played the banjo sexto, a Mexican 12-string instrument from the guitar family. His musical style was very unique, and Solis wasn't born here in Detroit, but it was home to him. And the history of Southwest Detroit cannot be told properly without the inclusion of Martin Solis and Los Primos. Joining us on the show is Frank Solis. He is a local historian, a musician who's helped and continues to help preserve Tejano music in Detroit. He's also the son of the late Martin Solis. Frank, welcome to the Metro.
Thank you for having me this morning.
So good to have you.
Yeah.
So your father brought Tejano music to Detroit in the 1940s. He's one of the first ones touring around Metro Detroit, playing this music in a very unique way. So briefly, tell us a little bit about his journey and how he became so influential in Tejano music.
The family, my dad was born in 1929 in San Antonio, Texas, and that's where the music originated from. The style of Tejano music originated from Texas. And at the time, he was the firstborn, but they migrated, the Solis family migrated through the agriculture sectors here in Michigan and Ohio and Indiana. And that's where he started playing guitar. He picked it up in Texas at a young age, at 6. And he started playing, and then they went and they worked in the fields, and then they came to Detroit, the family. He went to Northwestern High School for a period, where he met my mother. And from there, he moved to, I think the family moved to Indiana. And then from there, it was into the service, and he was already playing by then. And when he got out, that's when he really started putting the groups together. They came back to Detroit. There were really no venues here at all for Mexican-American music at all. There were a lot of house parties that they played at, but there was one, the Mercury Bar on Michigan Avenue.
Still there.
Okay.
I love their burgers,
Yeah,
but yeah.
in the 60s, that was a venue that they played at. I have some photographs on my site with that. But they started playing there at the Mercury, and then there was another bar called the 1000 Bar.
Yeah.
And they started playing there. There were other groups, but his group was the ones that were being booked at that time.
Yes, that was one of the things I loved reading about, was the fact that there weren't many spaces to play at bars or anything like that. And then your father comes in with Los Primos, and before you know it, they're booking bars and different venues across the city of Detroit. So can you talk about that style of music, Tejano music, and what it all comes together to be, how it comes together?
The Tejano music is based on, it's accordion driven, but then you have the 12-string bass guitar for the rhythm beats, the drums, and a bass. That's how it started. But originally it was an accordion and just a bajo sexto. And then it moved up where the drums came in, and then the electric bass and the bajo and the amplification for everything, and that's when it started. It's really big in Texas and throughout Mexico, but it's an American-based music.
Yes, which is just, once again, so interesting. So in 2018, you're cleaning out your parents' attic. You're doing the thing. You're doing the son thing. and you find this bag of tapes. What was going through your mind when you opened this bag and you say, what the heck is this?
Well, I was really going to throw it out at first. I was going to toss it because I thought it was just junk wrapped up, and I decided to look at it. But behind that was that he had already been inducted into the Tejano Roots Hall of Fame in Alice, Texas, and that was the first for anybody in Tejano music from Michigan, from the state of Michigan. So when I submitted his bio, we didn't have any recording except for one cassette tape that I had, and that was from the Las Vegas bar, which is Zocalo's in Mexican Town. That used to be a big venue there in the 70s. So I already submitted. He already been inducted, and I thought, well, this is it. You know, we did what we did, and I didn't really expect a lot of what has been happening since. So I found the tapes, and they were like 65 years old, and I had never heard any of his recordings with my Uncle Willie, the two of them, the Los Primos. I'd never heard any of it. So when I found the tapes, I opened up, and they were old. You know, they said
cobwebs on them.
Yeah, I mean, they were old. They were Los Primos, 1958, 1965.
Wow.
A lot of their recordings were just rehearsal tapes. And so with that, I contacted Ed Gillis, which is a brother of Jack White here in Detroit, and the Gillis family. So me and Ed had decided, well, we're going to see if we can preserve them and put them on a disc, and I was going to give them out to the families. After we heard them, we knew that, you know, they were pretty clear. They needed some work to clean up. So Ed called his brother up, Jack, and Jack had always been a fan of Tejano music.
Wow,
Yeah,
I did
just
not
casually,
know that.
yeah,
That's
yeah,
okay, yeah.
And so Jack had always been, he always liked it. Even in his interviews, when it might get loud, and Jack White was talking, he was talking about going down the bars on Vernon. He'd hear these Mexican bands, and that was my dad.
Oh.
That they were playing. So he assigned his brother to clean them up with an engineer. They cleaned up the tapes, and the album came, his first and last album.
And I'm holding it in my hands right now.
Describe
Martin
it for
Solis
us,
and Los
yeah,
Primos.
that's
And it's just
wild.
like a beautiful portrait of them. I believe this is from 1963, this photo.
Yeah.
And it is just the whole band, I believe. Right now I see your father right there with the guitar. And then it's the whole band there. You have saxophones, you got the
suits.
drummers, and they're in their suits from 1963. It's really, 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 really classic, and it's really amazing. And I think it's so amazing because this is a history of the city of Detroit. This is just as important as any other history that's told here in the city of Detroit. So when we talk about preserving this history, you also had the plaque that was recently put up, the historical marker that was recently put up as well. And one of the things that struck me instantly was seeing WDET's name on that plaque and that marker being noted as someone who played and often played and recorded Tejano music here at this station. Not at this particular location. We've moved since then, but WDET was very, very integral in playing Tejano music in Detroit. So if we can talk about that historical marker, the importance of that, and finally seeing recognition come to the city of Detroit, especially Southwest, for Tejano music.
Yeah, we after the album had came out too, we had already been. I'd working with a gentleman, Kevin Hill. And he was with the Michigan Music Hall of Fame. And we spoke, we got together, and then we decided, you know, well, what are we going to do? Is there anything that we can do to get the story out? And we'd come up with sites in Southwest Detroit. We come with my wife, Anna, who had mentioned that why don't we do it at 21st and Bagley, where the new... where the train station is now at, and the Welcome Center. So we got together with Ray Lozano, Third Man Records, of course, and we started petitioning the state, and we did that. There was a lot of research that had to be done because for historical marker, you have to have facts, and you have to have it. So through all our research as an individuals that we went through, we had found already what we needed to know. I already knew about the Las Vegas bar, that at one time that was a bar, and the radio program would come out of that. I also knew about the Mercury Bar, the Luna Pier Ballroom, in where a lot of the Tejano groups ended up playing too. So that's how it started, and we worked on it. Was a lot of paperwork, a lot of legwork. Then of course COVID hit.
Yeah.
So we continued to work what we were doing. So COVID put us back 2 years, and then we got the word that it was, that the marker was approved from the state.
I love it so much. So before, because we're getting down towards the end here, but, I think about the release. I think about the music itself and the history here in the city of Detroit and the pride that Detroiters have about being from the city. If you can go into the pride of having this connection, deep connection, these deep roots with your family, your father, Los Primos, and the history of Detroit and why it matters so much to you.
Well, we're very proud is that Motown, which I'm very proud of Motown. I love the Motown music, like playing it. They have their own marker. And down at Mexicatown, we have our own. Out of 1,800 markers in the state of Michigan, this is the first one honoring the musicians and the migrations from Texas to Michigan and that style of music. So that's a first, and very proud of that. And and the other musicians, we also commissioned to have a monument done that goes next to that one with other musicians that are around there. And those are all my dad's friends. Nice. And before he passed, he had told me that if there was any way that I could do anything to mention his friends that played. So we did that, and we honored them with the marker.
That is just so beautiful. It truly is. And right, once again, before I let you go, what else do you see coming in the near future, especially when we talk about the preservation of Tejano music in Detroit and in Michigan as a whole, but the preservation of the history of Southwest Detroit and what's next for you?
Well, we just got done. There was a street, our street in Melvindale was named after him. That was in August.
In Melvindale?
In Melvindale, yeah, that was in August. The city, the government there approved, and we lived on Stanley, and the house is still there. My mom, we lived on Stanley, and the crossover street was B Street. They changed that to Martin Solis.
Wow!
So we had that going, and then he got inducted into the Conjunto Music Hall of Fame in San Benito, Texas. So he's a first-time Michigan musician artist that has been inducted into the Hall of Fame in Texas.
That's amazing history that we have to continue to tell here at WDET. I personally cannot wait until we find and dig up some of that old music and archives. Hopefully we can find it of the programs here that played Tejano music played.
That would be nice to have,
So we're going to try to do our due diligence as journalists and dig that information up. Frank Solis is a local historian, the son of Martin Solis, as well as a musician. His father was Martin Solis, founding members of Detroit Tejano band Los Primos. Martin did pass away in 2019 at the age of 90, and he was inducted, like you said, into 2 Hall of Fames for being one of the first. The first in Michigan as well. The first in Michigan to be inducted in the Hall of Fame for Tejano music. That's amazing. So thank you so much for sharing this story with us here on the Metro.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Coming up, we'll discuss a new book that explores a Detroit with a dystopian future. Stay with us.
It's the Metro on 101.9 WDET FM. I'm Tia Graham here with
Sam Corey. It's so good to be here with you, too. That last conversation was just so delightful.
This whole show so far has been really, really delightful. I mean, I have a few folks that I have to apologize to now.
Okay.
Let's get this tour going. Yep, I got some apologies I got to throw out there soon.
All have
so,
them, man.
yeah.
Getting vulnerable here.
Learned a little history, Detroit history, which was great. Love doing that. And now we're bringing on a local author, which we love books here.
We do.
And what does it take to write a book? We don't know. We just like reading them. To self-publish a book, or what does it mean to tell a story with hopes it resonates with readers? A local author wants to spread the joy of reading, writing, and stretching imagination. Mayan Adafuche is a graduate of Columbia College of of Chicago, where she studied fiction writing and poetry, and among other things, she is a Detroiter. She recently wrote the book Garbage Dump, which is a dystopian fictional story set in Detroit. And in the book, readers follow the characters that fight for freedom and so much more. Here now to discuss this with us is the author, Mayanne. Welcome to the Metro.
Thank you.
So good to have you here with us.
Thank you. I appreciate you having me, seriously.
Of course. And your book is, okay, number one, you're from the city of Detroit.
Yes.
What part?
I actually was born in Detroit, like right in Midtown.
Really?
Okay.
You were born right
Cecil Hospital.
Yes.
Okay.
You were at the baby hospital.
Yes.
So your book is about the future, but the idea that people have little control over their government, over their lives. I wonder if that idea was something that you were trying to tap into the present. So that a lot of people in Detroit don't feel like they have an opportunity for upward mobility and to control their own destiny. So is this kind of your way of kind of putting that together in the book?
Yes, and I've been thinking about this book for a long time before I actually wrote it.
Yeah.
And like now with the political climate, I'm like, okay, I was on to something. But I feel like if you don't make a choice, it's still a choice, you know? And we have so much going on politically now, and even like history can repeat itself. So we have to know what's going on. We have to be like abreast of political issues because they affect us, you know? You have to think, you have to read, you have to know what's going on in your community.
Yes, and that's exactly what the book, when I started to go through the book, I said, oh, wait a minute. This is getting a little close to home. Hold on. Because the book did feel like 1984 to me, one of my favorite books. I love that book, Orson Welles. And the overlord in time cam and the people are trapped in a big housing project. Why do you want to write this kind of dystopian set in Detroit? Why Detroit? Of course, you're from Detroit.
Yes.
But why?
I feel like everybody writes about Chicago, New York, Atlanta.
Everybody writes about New York. Yes. Every story is about New York. Oh my God.
And there's so much happening right here in the city. I'm from it. You have to write what you know.
Yeah.
If I was writing about Chicago, it would kind of be not authentic because even though I was there for undergrad, Detroit is my home. And I want to always, like, most of the stuff I write takes place in Detroit, which, you know, because it's the opportunity to show people what we're about. And as a Detroiter, I want to see more things about us.
Yes, same. Seeing your books, they're shorter. It's a shorter read too, so it's a quick read. You can get really into it. It's really digestible, and that was one of my favorite things. It's like you can pick this up, read this in maybe a day. Maybe
I did that intentionally.
And it's a really good book. It's really fun.
Thank you.
So you're writing about people essentially being enslaved, being held in this particular place. They aren't free.
No.
What does
Trapped in
freedom
Detroit,
look like to you?
I think freedom is able to get up and make a decision. This is what I want to do and do it. It could be what food you eat, if you get in your car and drive or not. It could be a major decision like who you're voting for.
Yeah.
So to have choices, we think that, oh, okay, I can make this choice. But not a lot of people even now have that option in the global world. Like we have that option in America, but not everybody has that option. You know?
Can I ask you about this a little bit? I mean, a lot of people, I think, understandably get disenchanted. They feel very estranged from like political government. They don't feel like they can really participate, and they feel like when they do participate, it really doesn't matter. I guess, what do you say to someone who thinks that, who believes that?
Well, I can see how they would see that, and I think that sometimes we're given things and we just have to pick, but you have to take the opportunity to actually pick still, even though you feel like, you know, and then you have to break ground. You have to say, okay, let's fight for this. Maybe we need to advocate for this. Maybe we as a whole need to say we aren't taking this anymore. And I feel like in Garbage Dump, not too many people were willing to say, hey, we don't like this, because they were comfortable. They're like, this works for me. I get my food. I go to shop with my credits. It's cool. But it's not cool. Sometimes you have to fight, unfortunately. We don't want to look at it that way. But if we have the options and we don't like them, what we're going to do, you have to say, I don't like this. Yeah. You know?
Yes. If you are just tuning in to the Metro, we are chatting with Mayanne Adefuche, the author of Garbage Dump, which is a book about a Detroit that is dystopian. It has a dystopian future, and we're chatting about the book as well. What's it like to self-publish? So honestly, I was just on Threads and I'm scrolling, and they're talking about, what is it? How do I publish this book? How do I become a self-published author? What does that process look like?
When I first started, it was very much more difficult than it is now. I started in like 2007. But now you can easily go and publish with Amazon in like 40 minutes if you know what you're doing. Yeah. But you have to, I would say, first, before any of that, take time and write. Like spend time every week, even if it's only 30 minutes a weekday, and you work on your book. get with a group, like a writer's group, and get feedback, because we may think it's wonderful, but you need some other feedback, seriously. But when you find a group, don't just get a group. Find a group that likes the genre of what you're writing, or that is interested in what you write, or that is like your demographic of what you're writing.
Yeah.
Then I would also say find an editor. Even if you feel like you're really good and you know what you're doing, find an editor to go over to after you're done with everything. Then make sure you get your own ISBN. Amazon will give you one. You don't want that because it's theirs once you move on.
What is an
Get
ISBN?
your own. ISBN is like the barcode of the book. It's like basically this is my book stamp.
Yeah, it's your copyright kind of thing. Yeah.
So do that, and if you don't have a ton of money or whatever, just self-publish to actually mail the book to yourself. That's the old like poor man's copyright, to have it like recorded or wherever, and don't open it. But make sure that if you want to do Amazon, you can do a cover with them. Anything that you want to do, it's so much easier. But know what you're doing. Like, I would honestly recommend people not to get the ISBN through Amazon. Get it through, there's like other agencies that you can buy, and it's yours. It's your right. So if you want to move it somewhere else, if you do get traditionally published, you can still use that ISBN. You don't have to get a new one.
And just listening to what you're saying right now and explaining this process, there are so many folks who are just thinking to themselves, well, I didn't know if it was easy or hard process or whatnot. But, from your perspective and your work as an author, what do you wish you would have known as you were getting started, especially even now? What are some things that you're still learning as a self-published author?
I've been to a ton of writers' conferences in Michigan. I've been to different things in like New York for publishers and writers. But I think that you have to remember, if you self-publish, you're going to have to put in the work. You aren't going to just publish it overnight as success. You got to be willing to go into the local bookstores. You got to be willing to grassroot if you have to. Set up shop with some store. It may be it might be unorthodox, but if a store is willing to let you come in, they have heavy foot traffic, be willing to set up a table and let people know, hey, this is my book. Because I find in Detroit, a lot of people will purchase if you're right there in front of them. They'll be like, okay, I'll check this out. I'll give you a chance, But don't think that you're just going to automatically be rich because you wrote a book. And a lot of people think that, and that's not how it works.
I want to take us back a little bit, because you're talking about the early stages. It's not easy to get rich. But you were talking about the early stages of writing, of investments, man, of writing, and how that process is difficult. It can be, arduous. I'm wondering if you can describe sort of why that process is also beautiful and the way it sort of changed you, because I think writing offers so much to people, but it's long, it's hard. You have to be vulnerable, right? You're throwing yourself out there. It's very intimate information that you're just kind of displaying on the page for people to read. I'm wondering what that process was like, and I guess how you grew or how you changed through it.
Well, for me, I'm an artist. Everything is art, and when I come up with an idea, it kind of takes over. And I've heard some actors say, like, the character just comes to them and tells them certain things, like, this is what I want. Like, literally, I have no control necessarily. I didn't want what happened in the book to happen. I was like, no. But the characters kind of become their own thing, their own entity, and you have to do what they want. And I feel like you also have to be willing to not do what you feel you want that's predictable or a nice happy ending. Not everything is going to be a happy ending, unfortunately. Some things will, some things won't. Yeah. That's life,
It's like a conduit, like the characters are sort of like moving through you.
Yes.
You're just kind of there to help them, to help facilitate.
She's just the mouthpiece. She's the hand. She's just the hand to what that character is going through. You kind of immerse yourself in that character's identity, their thought process, and you're writing from their perspective,
exactly,
which is extremely difficult to do, to put yourself in other people's shoes. And I think to myself, even just being a woman, of course, being a woman of color, being a chameleon, talk about that and what it means to be a chameleon and being an author and how those two come together, because you have to be so you have to think so big.
Yeah, I think to be an author in Detroit of color, you have to be willing to be the businesswoman, to be the salesperson, to be the artist, all of that, in like conjunction with each other. I feel like too, like you have to be able to take criticism. You have to be strong, and we're like artists. We're like, that's my art. But you have to hear the feedback. That's why I think it's so important to be in a writer's group. And not be isolated, because writing is a lonely thing. You're all by yourself. If you don't show it to anyone, you are like just doing it alone. And I think that so many times as artists, we get stuck in this is what I want, this is how I feel, but you have to be open.
Yeah. So before we let you go, because we do have, I'm looking at your book right now, The Garbage Dump. It is on Amazon. You can get it on Amazon right now. I saw it on Amazon. But as well, I just wanted to know about any future books that you have in works right now. Are you working on anything that we should be on the lookout for?
Of course. I'm actually writing something now. It's very controversial, but it takes place in Detroit again, and the girl goes to Wayne State. The main character goes to Wayne State.
That's where we are right now.
Get ready, y'all.
So it's a lot going on in that one. It's dealing with different things from immigrant parents, from being in college at a young age, from parental issues, familial, like family issues, and just what it's like growing up in Detroit, as a young girl, an immigrant's child, you know?
Yeah, I'm just throwing this out there, because you're an author. I'm just throwing a story out there for you. Just
I'm so excited. I'm
a wizarding world in Detroit. That's all. I just want to see some wizards in Detroit.
Yeah, we need that.
We need wizards in Detroit. I want to see
Detroit.
witches and wizards and like ghouls and goblins. A story like that in Detroit.
We already have that plurality. It just needs to be. It needs to spread itself across the page.
Thank you so much to Mayanne Adefuche. She is the author of Garbage Dump and so many other books. You can find her on Amazon. Where else can we find you?
Thank you. I'm on Amazon. I'm on Facebook, my first name. If you go on Amazon, you put in Garbage Dump By, it'll pop up, and you can get my name and find me on Facebook as well.
Thank you so much for joining us on the Metro. We look forward to chatting with you in the future.
Awesome. Thank you.
Coming up on the Metro.
The Tigers won yesterday against the Cleveland Guardians. Let's go.
I think we're allowed to do it. Whoa, whoa, whoa. The Detroit Tigers. We're going to have a conversation with Detroit Free Press sports columnist Sean Windsor coming up just next. You all stay right there.
Torkelson turns on it down the left field line. That's fair and to the wall. Cole Keith will score. Spencer Torkelson makes it 3-0 Tigers. His first hit of the postseason.
That was Spencer Torkelson getting a RBI double, and the Tigers win yesterday. The Tigers are red hot right now, beating the Astros in the wild card round, and now they're leading the Cleveland Guardians 2-1 in the American League Division Series. That means they could win the series and move on to the next round if they win today at Comerica Park. To help us recap, it's exciting.
It's so
exciting. To help us recap this incredible season and get us ready for today's first pitch, we're joined by Sean Windsor. He's a sports columnist for the Detroit Free Press. Sean, welcome back to the Metro.
Oh, it's good to be back. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, we're so glad to have you here right now. It's a celebratory reason.
It is.
It was a rocky start for the Tigers for a long time, but a strong finish to the regular season toward the end. What's it been like to ride this roller coaster of a season as a fan and as a sports reporter?
Well, as a fan, I mean, I'm sort of putting myself in fans' shoes, although I was a fan when I was young. You know how sports writers are. We try to stay as objective as we can.
Keep a little distance. Try to separate yourself a little bit. Okay.
You try to, but you also kind of got to know what you're writing about too, right? You have to have some idea of why people love these games that we write about and cover. I don't think maybe y'all have a different idea, but I'm not sure there's anything more rewarding or joyful in sports than a team that kind of comes out of nowhere and a team that has not been good for a while. And so there's the surprise that goes along with that it's hard to replicate if you're a New England Patriots fan and you win, 6 Super Bowls in 15 years, that's fun. I'm not diminishing that at all. That's great. But when you love a team and they've struggled for so long, and then you get into the season and it looks like they're struggling again, and you get all the way to August, And all of a sudden, they turn this on, and here they are, a game away from the American League Championship Series. It's just it's hard to these kind of moments, these kind of rides, the feelings that this metropolitan area is, the whole state really is feeling right now.
Yeah,
it's a once in a generation kind of a thing, and it's hard to replicate that. I mean, the Tigers could do this again next year. It'll be fun, but it won't be quite what this is.
Right.
Yeah, it feels like, Sean, a continuation of just the high we've been feeling after a playoffs a run with the Lions at the beginning of this year, and then now we're getting a run in October with the Tigers. So were there any moments during this season for you that hinted that the Tigers were actually good enough or to make it into the playoffs?
Well, it's funny. They started off okay the first week or so. Of course, they were playing the Chicago White Sox, and I don't think nobody thought they were going to be great, but I don't think anybody realized they were going to be historically bad. So maybe that was a little bit of false advertising. But no, and then they traded away their second best pitcher, or at least what we thought at the time, at Jack Flaherty, the Los Angeles Dodgers, at the trade deadline in the middle of the summer, and you're thinking, okay, this is about the future. Get some more young pieces, and it's all about next year. And then I guess because they make some trades, the manager, A.J. Hinch, has to kind of lean into this somewhat radical idea. A couple other teams have done this before, but just this idea that you don't really have any starting pitchers other than Tarek Skubal.
Yeah, I want to get into that, Sean, because it is pretty wild, and it's something that seems really unique. The Tigers have been doing something really different, as you're saying, with pitchers this year, utilizing their bullpen to keep batters on their toes. 6 pitchers took the mound for the Tigers yesterday. We have a clip from Tigers manager A.J. Hinch talking about their approach to pitching.
There was no order, that I had in my mind. I just knew I had 10 guys available, and we were going to use them. So we've been doing this for a couple months, so our guys respond favorably and did an incredible job of getting up, getting ready, and getting their hitters out almost perfectly, in terms of coming in situations and pounding the strike zone and doing their part to put pressure on them to continue innings.
Can you talk, Sean, a little bit about that strategy of trying to keep batters on their toes, of not knowing what's coming next?
Well, sure. As your listeners know, traditionally in baseball, you have a starter, and you hope your starter pitches 6-7 innings, and maybe more. In the older, Justin Verlander used to occasionally throw a complete game. But you build a rotation, and your starters go every 5 days, and you have 4 or 5 starters. The Tigers have basically used Tarek Skubal, and then they throw bullpen games. Yesterday, Keter Montero threw 1 inning, 6 pitches, got 3 outs. Normally, that gets you the next inning and probably several more innings, but Hinch took him out and then brought in a succession of pitchers out of the bullpen. And so there's a couple things here. One is that there are no defined roles in the bullpen. And often you have maybe a setup man in the 8th inning, you have a closer in the 9th inning. Well, Bo Brisky, who closed, I want to say, Game 2 to help clinch the wild card series against Houston in the 9th inning, and who's in some ways been their best closer recently, comes in the 5th inning yesterday. So these pitchers have no idea what inning they're coming in, what kind of situation they're coming in. So they have to be ready for anything. And that took some getting used to. But now that they're used to it, it's kind of an advantage because the opposing batters never get into a rhythm. It's even the best pitchers struggle to get through the lineup the second and third times because the hitters start getting a rhythm and they kind of know what's coming.
They've disrupted it. It's something totally different.
Exactly. They've got to see a pitcher, sometimes a different pitcher, every at bat.
Hey, Sean, so we're running up against the end of time here. I'm sorry to do this, but we do have, I just want to ask you a quick question before we let you go. The game today, what kind of game do you see at Comerica Park? What do you see unfolding?
Oh, real quickly, it's a tough matchup. Cleveland has their ace, and Bibby throwing is going to be another bullpen outing for the Tigers. But who knows? I don't know.
Spoken like a true reporter.
Yeah, it's hard to explain what is going on, but there's some magic. Well, let's say that.
All right.
Sean Windsor, sports columnist for the Detroit Free Press. Thank you so much for joining us on the Metro. Go Tigers.
Go Tigers.
Oh, always a pleasure.
This is WDET-FM, Detroit Public Radio, your connection to news, music, and conversation. You all have a great Thursday, and go Tigers.